my estimate is about 25% of Americans would want to have a different country. They'd want to change everything. Almost all of them are either Democrats or libertarians. Republicans, by definition, are traditional people. They whine about the country and complain, but they don't want to see it thrown out the window and start from scratch. Now, radicalism in the USA is on the rise, but it's not a crisis yet. Gets a lot of attention. You see a lot of the extremists, but the folks, you don't have 77 million people vote for Donald Trump just a year and 4 months ago, all right, if it's a radical nation. So it's not there yet. However, Mandani has power in New York, Fry in Minneapolis, Pritzker in Illinois, and these are people who, if they could, would tear it all down. So it's worth watching. Now, there are some who are now actively fighting against the radicalism, and that is the subject of this evening Talking Points memo. The latest is Christianity versus Marxism. Fascinating story. So you may know Bishop Robert Barron. He is one of the most powerful clerics in the country. He is on social media. He has Word of Fire, and it is a very, very successful website. And traditional people not on social media may not know him, but boy, this guy has a lot of influence. And he is the sitting bishop in the Diocese of Winona, Rochester, Minnesota, right south of Minneapolis. Well, anyway, Bishop Barron, and I know him, I wouldn't say he's a close friend, but we do correspond. Bishop Barron is one of the few clerics of all faiths in America who will take on what he sees as danger to the country. His latest is about Marxism in America. Go.
What's worrying me, everybody, is the extent to which political leadership on the left in America is becoming, it's unapologetically Marxist. The mayor of New York City, the warmth of collectivism. He's calling for the confiscation of private property, of seizing the means of production. All language right out of the Communist Manifesto. Might I encourage followers of, Mayor Mamdani and AOC, talk to some of them. They're still alive, some of them. The people that fled Marxist tyranny in Europe. People laboring under it to this day in Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela, etc. And then this too. It concerns me not just as someone who follows politics, but as a bishop of the Catholic Church. Marx himself said the first critique is a critique of religion, and his political adepts followed him. The first thing that the Marxist tyrannies went after in most cases was religion.
And that is true. If you want to see more of Bishop Barron, by the way, it's wordonfire.org. All right, so Stalin in 1928, when he was consolidating power in the Soviet Union, he implemented a godless 5-year plan. Now, I write about Stalin in my book, Confronting Evil. The plan gave local cells, regular people who were atheists, the power to commit violence against religious people. Leaders of churches were imprisoned, sometimes executed, and Stalin let it go. So it was open season. 1949, Mao Zedong, China. He's also in Confronting Evil. So he started a nationalism campaign where the government in Beijing confiscated churches, threw them, all the clerics out, took the buildings, and did whatever they wanted. And Buddhist monks, Catholic priests, Protestant Christian evangelists, they were persecuted, sometimes killed by Mao. And in Cuba today, which is falling apart, Fidel Castro wouldn't even allow the people to celebrate Christmas Cuba is almost 100% Catholic country. Okay? So Bishop Barron historically is right. Now, it was interesting because Mayor Mamdani is a Muslim. But when the new bishop in New York City celebrated his first Mass last week, Mamdani didn't show up. And that was unbelievable breach of etiquette. So I don't know if Mamdani or AOC or Bernie Sanders, I don't know what their active posture is on religion. They don't talk about it. But under the Marxist philosophy, religion is a threat. Why? Because if you are a communist, everything is devoted to the state. Can't have a God. You don't have individual rights. The state does what it wants to do, and you support that. So when I was in Beijing in May, one of the amazing things was the Chinese police authorities could pick you up, charge you with crimes against the people. What's that? It's anything they want it to be. And you can get executed for crimes against the people. It's whatever they want it to be. Okay? That's what you're facing. Of course, you don't have lawyer or due process or any of that. So that's Marxism. It is an atheistic movement, and it is on the rise. Again, I don't think it's a threat yet, but it's certainly more acceptable than it used to be in America. And that is Department of Homeland Security. Okay, it's out of business for the time being because Democrats won't fund it because they want all kinds of modifications to ICE. And so they're down. And here's the kicker. They have to stop all their investigations. There are 8 active investigations being done by the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security against ICE. Because let's face it, let's be honest. All the ICE agents aren't perfect. And there has been some abuse and have been investigated. Well, that stops. Okay? So I expect this thing will be, Congress is on a recess now. When they come back, they'll work it out, I think. Joining us from Montclair, New Jersey is a former Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, 4 years under Barack Obama. We're very pleased to have the Secretary with us. You know, you in Obama's second term deported more people, all right, than Donald Trump did in his first term. And so when I see that stat, and the Democrat Party didn't give you a hard time on that, did they?
There were certainly activists on the, first of all, Mr. O'Reilly, thank you for having me on your show. There were certainly activists on the left that gave us a very hard time about deportations. President Obama was labeled the deporter in chief in 2013, 2014, and I knew that that aggravated him because it was in the midst of an effort to try to achieve comprehensive immigration reform. But yes, the deportation numbers were high. It's a product of a bunch of different things, crossings, interior enforcement, and the crossings into the United States were fairly low during his second term. My second full year in office, border crossings, illegal border crossings were, I think, the second lowest number since 1972. And that too is a product of a lot of different things, but enforcement certainly contributed to that.
Yeah, I wasn't railing about lax enforcement under the Obama administration, but the party, yes, you're right, radicals will always do that. Open border people, always. But the party, Schumer, all these guys, they supported you and Barack Obama in trying to regulate who was coming into the country, by and large. Is that correct?
That is correct. I would agree with that statement.
Right. So what's changed? What's changed? Now, that you have a flood because of President Biden, why isn't Chuck Schumer saying, no, we got to get this under control?
So I don't quite know the answer to that. What I do know, the hard lessons I learned managing this problem is you probably have found the right balance when both sides are screaming at you, or you don't hear anything at all about this issue. You've got people on the right who say there are too many illegal crossings. I believe there's a racist component to that, but
Really? You
securing
really
our
think
border.
so? You think that
Yes, I do.
if Belgians were coming over to the tune of 15 million, that the Republicans wouldn't scream?
I believe that there is a racist element. I also believe that securing our border is a legitimate government objective. I believe Americans are entitled, for the most powerful nation on earth, to know who is entering our country. So that is a legitimate government objective that I and President Obama certainly worked toward. I also believe that there is a very large category of people in this country who entered this country illegally who have become de facto Americans. You know who they are.
Sure.
They've committed no crimes. They want to be accountable. They want to get on the books. They have kids who are U.S. citizens. And we got to deal with that population.
And President Obama, your boss, did want to do that with the DREAMer Act, and he got nowhere because his party and the Republican Party didn't cooperate with him. But I'm more interested in this. So you're the probably one of the 5 guys in the country who know this subject best. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching an evolution of a party, the Democrats, from yes, we have to enforce immigration law, to no, we don't want to enforce it, because they are using that issue to hammer the Trump administration. Now, here's the key question. What is the Trump administration doing differently than what you did?
Well, I'm going to come back to something. I may be one of the 5 people who understand how to manage this problem, but you're much more astute politically than I am. The politics of immigration have overwhelmed any desire for smart policy. And the evidence of that is what is happening now. And the evidence of that is what happened 2 years ago after Senator Lankford and Senator Murphy negotiated a pretty good bipartisan bill that was pretty strong on border security. But the politicians didn't want to fix the problem. They'd rather have the problem as something to complain about.
Okay, so you believe that the political aspect overwhelms the fairness aspect. But this is important.
On both sides.
This is important, Mr. Secretary. You guys deported 1.5 million people under your term, 4 years. And that doesn't count the first term, okay? That's a lot of folks. The Trump administration so far, 1 year, about 700,000, all right? So you guys and the Trump administration were simpatico in saying we have to round these people up, see who they are, okay, and then decide whether they should stay or go. Not everybody the Trump administration rounds up gets deported, not everyone. So what is the difference between the agents, the ICE agents, under you and under Trump?
Well, there are elements of deportations. You know, is it expedited deportation of people who just crossed the border, or are you trying to deport people in the interior of the country who've been there for a very long time? And
well, you got to have a warrant. You got to have a reason, and that's what's unreported. The press won't report that if you don't show up for an asylum hearing, for example, you're right on the deportation list. You may not be a violent criminal. You may not have, but if you don't show up, you're out.
Right. So here's what I believe is the big difference, Bill. This administration started off, we're going to go after the worst of the worst. I think that's totally legitimate. In fact, that was my objective while I was in office. Go after the worst of the worst. Uh, but you don't try to achieve a quota for the sake of achieving a quota. You got to be smart about this. What is inevitably going to happen, which has happened in Minneapolis and other places, is the way ICE goes about its business becomes so controversial that the mayors, the city councils, the governors don't want to work with you anymore, which is essential if you're going to get at the worst of the worst for the benefit of public
Okay, but
safety.
you
The
had that
worst of
too,
the
though. You had sanctuary. California was a sanctuary state when you were in office. They didn't cooperate with
Yes,
you.
and we had a program called Secure Communities, which I totally changed, rebranded to call the Priority Enforcement Program, so that I could get people like Bill de Blasio and Michael Nutter in Philadelphia to start working with us again. I'd encounter people in city councils in Chicago who I'd say, why don't you give us the guy who's undocumented, who just finished a lengthy prison sentence because he committed a felony? And the answer I got was, why should I do that? He's already served his time. He's been punished. Come on, he's undocumented. So
Right.
it was that kind, right? It was that kind of attitude that we would often encounter. And my response would always be, work with me now before you are faced with a crisis. You've got a murder committed by an undocumented person who was released from jail. Wouldn't you rather work with me now on this? So we were making great strides to do that. And what I used to say to leaders of ICE, Tom Homan included, who worked for me, use your common sense when you're on the streets conducting interior enforcement. One controversial incident could derail your entire mandate, your entire ability to work within a community to get stuff done and turbocharge the sanctuary
Okay.
cities community.
Well, that's certainly logical. Now, do you believe Holman's a good man?
Homan was one of my key advisors. The answer is yes. He's very pro law enforcement. He's pro enforcement. I knew the label on that bottle of wine I was getting, but he's fundamentally a law enforcement officer. He's not an ideologue.
Do you believe that ICE agents in general are trained enough? Are they professional people?
In general, what I see sitting here, as an armchair quarterback these days, watching the videos, the images, I see a force that is not adequately trained in the tactics of de-escalation, which is common all throughout
Legitimate
New York City
criticism.
police.
Right. I've made that criticism. Finally, were you surprised when President Biden took office and the floodgates opened? Open border, 15 million. Anybody who wants asylum, you don't have to go to a port of entry anymore. You can just wander right across, cartels helping you, say, I want asylum. They'll give you a bus ticket. You go anywhere you want. Were you surprised at that kind of a policy?
Yes, I was.
Why do you think he did it? Why do you think he did it?
Well,
Biden?
I can tell you, I can explain the reaction better than the rationale. Illegal immigration bill is a very information sensitive phenomenon. It reacts sharply, upward or downward, to perceived changes in our enforcement policy on the southern border. When Biden came into office, he was perceived as being soft, and you saw the results. When Trump came into office, the numbers plummet. But, and here's the key corollary, so long as the push factors persist, the numbers are always going to revert back to their longer term trend lines. So when Trump took office in 2017, the numbers dropped. But by 2019, because the push factors persist, the numbers started to escalate again to the point where in 2019, he had something like 1 million crossings.
Well, that's
And
because
so-
of the Mexican situation. No, they didn't stop the caravans, and they were working with the drug cartels. The corruption in Mexico was off the board. And
Well,
the reason,
that's a key component.
of
Yes.
course, and
in
the reason that
2014, one of the reasons we got the numbers under control is because President Peña Nieto agreed to do more enforcement on his southern border
absolutely
with Central America, which is only 300 miles.
right. All right, Mr. Secretary, it's very nice of you to come on, and I hope you come back, and we really appreciate it. Final thought: Robert Duvall, met him 3 or 4 times. Crusty guy. I liked him. He was in two of my favorite movies of all time, The Godfather, Godfather 2. Mr. Duvall, 95 years old, died in Middleburg, Virginia, where he had a big ranch in the area. Beautiful, beautiful spread. And he lived an amazing life, Academy Award winner, Best Actor, in Tender Mercies. Now, he made his career in The Godfather as the consigliere Tom Hagen. Go.
They might like a story like that.
They might. They just might.
Now, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro are the two main actors still alive from The Godfather. And they are both legends. I mean, you don't have to like De Niro in particular. He's kind of obnoxious. Pacino, very interesting guy. Long conversation with him about the making of both Godfathers. Actually, he was in three of them. Robert Duvall did not sign on for the third Godfather, which was not nearly as good as the first two, in my opinion, because they didn't pay him enough. He felt disrespected. Anyway, all of the other principals have passed away. Now, why do I say they are the best movies I've ever seen? And here's why. Because they combine fiction with nonfiction. The part in Godfather 2 where Michael Corleone goes to Havana because the mob is going to take over Cuba from Batista, the corrupt dictator, is cooperating, and then Castro comes in and overthrows that. That's true. And there were so many things in both of those movies where Francis Ford Coppola, the director, he blended fiction and historical fact. And I wrote Killing the Mob, so I know a lot about this kind of stuff. So they were brilliant films. And if you haven't seen them, boy, that's a night if you watch them back to back. They're on cable every 2 minutes, so they're around. But rest in peace, Robert Duvall, brilliant actor. I particularly liked him in MASH. He was so good in the movie MASH. Okay, that is it for us today. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thank you for watching No Spin News. We'll see you again tomorrow. Most Americans don't care very much about the media. I know that. It's part of our lives, but it's distant from personal behavior, your personal circumstance. Polls say the American people believe the press is largely corrupt, which it is, and they can't do much about it because we have the First Amendment and all of that. And giant corporate media controls pretty much what you see on television and the major urban newspapers. That's changing because of social media, but it's still there. Now, television news in particular still has some power. It can ruin people. And it's not hard to do that. So linking anybody with Jeffrey Epstein, my God, no matter what the circumstance, is your name with his name, brutal. And if a news agency goes after you and wants to destroy you, it can do it. And it can also, the American media, protect people. That's the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. So the Rhode Island shooting was horrendous. Here's a high school hockey game, all right? And a guy shows up, Robert Dorgan, 56 years old. He kills his ex-wife, Rhonda, and his adult son, Aiden. He critically wounds Rhonda Dorgan's parents and a family friend, and then he commits suicide at the arena. I mean, it doesn't get worse than that, right? So it got a lot of coverage, but part of the story was ignored, that Robert Dorgan was a trans person who wanted to be called Roberta Dorgan. Okay. Here are the agencies that did not mention that while covering this story in Rhode Island. The Associated Press, CNN, ABC News, NBC News, MS, the New York Times. somehow did not mention that the murderer was a trans person. No excuse for that. Part of the story. I don't know the circumstance of this man, woman, whatever. I don't know. But when you are a trans person, that needs to be reported. Okay? But these agencies don't. That is deceitful. Now, their excuse is, well, we don't want to demonize trans people. Okay, but that's not your job. If you want to get into sociology, get out of journalism and go into sociology. Your job is to report the facts. Canada, not as bad, but the Associated Press is the absolute worst now. So remember on February 10th, guy kills 8 people, 18-year-old. He's transing to a woman. But I guess he's a guy, but I don't know. Jesse Van Rooselaar kills 8 people and he wounds 17 others in one of the worst mass shootings in Canadian history. Okay. The Associated Press doesn't mention that he was in transition. The Associated Press goes out all over the world. And I'm sitting here going, I would have fired every single editor at the AP. Again, same reason, because the Associated Press didn't identify the trans person in Rhode Island. Oh, no, 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 no. We're not going to do that because it's going to demonize. Now, I'm not the type of guy that says, well, trans people are mass murderers. I'd never do that. You go where the evidence takes you. I'll tell you it's not a difficult situation. It is a difficult situation, I should say. It's a tough road. And that can cause a lot of mental problems. That story should be told, not told. Okay? So it's disturbing, but it's not unique. The press has been covering for a lot of people. And let me give you a few examples. The biggest example is President Biden. Everybody knew that Biden was not mentally up to running this country. But the only reason that he did not run for re-election is because of the debate. So Americans saw for themselves. Press corps knew, because Biden avoided it. Okay, they knew that he was doddering. They knew he wasn't doing a job every day. He was knocking off at 3, starting at noon. They know all that. The White House corps knew it, covered it up. No doubt. Absolutely. I knew. All of my journalistic friends knew. Wasn't reported. Then you had the George Floyd looters. Remember that? Unbelievable destruction across the country. Did you do any follow-up on that? How many were arrested? How many went to jail? How many were involved in violent activities? Who they were? Who financed it? Did you get any of that? No. Total blackout. Compare that to January 6th. When the rioters there, they were identifying almost every one of them by name and face. So the looters for George Floyd, they get off, no exposure, but the January 6th rioters, many of them went to jail. They were pardoned by President Trump. And the final one is Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis. There's no question I made this, and nobody can refute it, that the 2 Americans who were killed, Renee Good and Alex Pretty, would be alive today if Mayor Fry had upheld his oath of office and protected the public. Okay? You don't have to subscribe to ICE. You don't have to help ICE. All you had to do was put Minneapolis cops between ICE and the protesters so nobody would get hurt. So any kind of a violent situation could be diffused by the local police before it got into the ICE precinct. That's not hard to do. Yet Fry and many of the press reports treated as sympathetic. We absolutely, those two dead people are on him. And you can't refute it. Absolutely, all he had to do, send the cops out there and make sure that public safety was upheld. That's all he had to do. Wouldn't do it for political reasons. So the press at this point not coming back. There's not going to be a renaissance. It's not going to be a rise of noble behavior. And many of us have left the corporate media and gone on our own. And obviously you're looking at the poster boy for that. And I have to tell you, there's so much relief involved. So I don't have to do this. I can report to you the news honestly. And that's the memo. Here's an interesting story adjacent to the memo. So President Trump said some very nice things about Jesse Jackson, who died yesterday, 84 years old. No mention of President Trump's praise of Jesse Jackson by ABC News, World News Tonight, NBC Nightly News, NPR, or the Wall Street Journal. None. Don't you think that's worth 10 seconds? Now, those agencies, all of them, they'll demonize Trump for anything. But when he says something nice about Jesse Jackson, ignore it. You couldn't work that in? Oof. President Trump today hosts a Black History Month celebration at the White House, which he should do. It's a noble thing. I don't know how much exposure it's going to get, probably not much. Tomorrow, President Trump will be going to Rome, Georgia, to talk about the affordability crisis, which is going to mean who wins in the midterm elections, no doubt about it. And there is a poll, Talker Research, 5,000 Americans online, says 90% believe that there is a crisis in the cost of living in America. 90%. Wow. So the president knows that and has to take it seriously. Some stats. We have about 335 million people in America, most of them citizens. There are 935 billionaires out of 335 million. So the billionaire population is minuscule. On the millionaire front, 25 million Americans have assets of more than $1 million. And that is 9% of the population, which is the highest in the world. Okay, we have more millionaires than anybody else because we have capitalism. The median net worth, that means 50% or lower, 50% higher, close to $200,000. That's what people are worth, half more, half less. And we are behind in that. One country only, Switzerland, has a higher median net worth. But there's only 9.5 million Swiss. So it's much easier for them to accumulate money than it would be in a nation of 335 million. Now, there's a new book out that you might want to check. It's an interesting book. It's called Why Democracy Needs the Rich. So remember, the left and the Democratic Party is saying, hey, income inequality is destroying the country. This is the opposite. It's written by a professor at Northwestern University, John O. McGinnis, who joins us now from Chicago. First of all, do you think it's a crisis, a cost of living crisis in America right now?
Well, I do think there are affordability problems. So they're not caused by the rich. They're caused rather by government regulation. I mean, what's striking is that a lot of things have become much more affordable. Everyone can have a library on their cell phone. The communication is much more affordable than it's ever been. But sectors where the government regulates a lot, housing, medical care, education, those have an affordability crisis. But the answer is actually better markets, not to attack rich people, or indeed to it's deregulation. It's an old way of providing affordability.
There's a lot of jealousy in the world, and very wealthy people like Jeff Bezos, who flaunts his wealth in your face. I mean, they don't do a lot of good for the affluent, I don't think. It's my opinion. But you say that wealthy Americans actually help the country more than harm it.
Yes, in a whole variety of ways. Well, one way that I think is very important is that they are a group of people with very diverse political views. They're liberals, they're conservatives. And the other people in the country who have a lot of influence in politics are professional influencers in the media, academics, entertainers. They all lean one way to the left. And so one way the rich help is by able to counterbalance these, by getting out and supporting people who do not have these views. So that's one important perspective that in which they help democracy, because democracy thrives through diversity of opinion.
What about trickle down economics? So wealthy people spend a lot of money and that helps working people. Is there anything to that? That's what Ronald Reagan believed.
I certainly think that's true to some extent, but I think wealthy people help people in a different way through their entrepreneurial ideas. I think that's even more important because we look at particularly our technology. It's one of the things that has actually made things free. People have a library of all information in the world in their cell phones. People have be able to connect to relatives without any costs. People have an access to information that's unparalleled in human history. And that's because of entrepreneurs who've taken a lot of risks. So I think that's really the great way that the wealthy help, by actually bringing new ideas and bringing them to market and making people better off, making things very affordable.
And Elon Musk would be in that category, right?
He would certainly be in that category. And in taking over Twitter, he's also helped diversity of opinion because he's actually made it much less likely that Twitter is going to kick people out for opinions that other people don't like. And he has the ability to do that. And this is crucial about the rich because he has an independence. He doesn't really care so much about a public opinion or what some politician thinks of him. And the independence of the rich is very important for democracy because democracy sometimes is very censorious, and you need to have people to stand up against the majority, and that's happened throughout American history.
Well,
the
the
rich
best,
are at the heart of the abolition movement, for instance.
the best example would be founding fathers. Most
And
of them
that's
were
also true.
very affluent, and they weren't tied to a. They all had a commonality. We don't want a king, but then they were just brawling out. Final question for you: Liberal and Democratic Party demonizing the rich. They're bad. They're greedy. They're hurting you. Purely politics, or is there something else there?
Oh, no, I think there is politics because if you reduce the influence of the wealthy, not because they're all conservative, you actually increase the influence of what I call the professional influencers, because they're the people who have influence in politics, the media, academics, entertainers, and they're just tremendously on one side of the political spectrum. So I see this as a political power grab, which has often happened. You scapegoat people you don't like as a way of gaining power, and that's a very unfortunate aspect of democracy, and it's something the rich are able to stand up against better than some other sectors of society.
Yeah, but they haven't in New York City because that's exactly what happened. So Mamdani is in there, and the city is going to collapse, in my opinion. The book is Why Democracy Needs the Rich, John McGinnis. And we appreciate it, Professor. Thanks for coming on and talking with us today.
I very much enjoyed it. Thanks so much, sir.
Today is one of the most important rituals in the Christian community. It's Ash Wednesday. I'm going to get my ashes right after I finish taping this. I'm going over to my church. I'll get the ashes on the forehead. And I'll probably wear them on Cuomo tonight. So I'm on News Nation. Stephen A. is going to be there. I'm going to be there. Cuomo's going to be there. I'll probably have my ashes on then. That's News Nation. Check it out, 8 o'clock. Now, I was surprised as I asked my researchers, I said, are the Protestants involved with Ash Wednesday? Because a lot of times Protestant sects, religions, don't follow Roman Catholics. Roman Catholics were first. They came very soon after Christ was crucified. St. Paul started it, and then it spread all throughout the Roman Empire. You know that. And then it was a Reformation where the Protestants said, no, the Catholic Church is too corrupt. We're going to have our own church. However, on Ash Wednesday, Baptists, Lutherans, Methodists, Episcopals, and Presbyterians all celebrate, I don't know if celebrate's the right word, Ash Wednesday. Now, the secularists and the pagans, they don't know what Ash Wednesday is. They have no idea. It's a very interesting ritual, as they said. So the philosophy is you came from dust. Okay, you came from really conception, but you weren't here, and you will return to that dust. So you'll be gone when you die. And that's to keep people humble. Okay, to say, okay, you think you're really great, O'Reilly, you strut around, and you think you're better than everybody else. Now, I don't, but, you know, some people think I do. You know, you're going to be dust like everybody else. So it's a reminder that we're all in it together. We're not better than anybody else, and we're all going to wind up in the same place when we die. Now, and if you believe in the afterlife, we're not going to wind up in the same place. But when we die, we're dead. Okay, so that's what it is. But for Roman Catholics, and that's my religion, of course, Irish Catholic lineage way, way back on my side, you are acknowledging that you're a sinner. And that the 40 days of fasting and thing leads up to Easter. But the most important thing is you're sorry for your misdeeds. So that is very worthy because we all do bad things. We're all sinners. And if we can have a time of the year where we are focused in on that, we can improve ourselves. So that's Ash Wednesday. And I have to do these kind of commentaries because a lot of people, I go to younger people, hey, it's Ash Wednesday. And I go, what? No idea. None. If you're public school reared, if you go from preschool to end of college in a public school, you'll never hear about it. You won't know anything about it. If you have parents who are just, they don't care about really, you have no idea. But it's part of our country. It's part of our fabric. We are a Judeo-Christian nation. Our philosophy is built on that. Anyway, probably said too much about Ash Wednesday, but I'm trying to atone for some sins, so please forgive me. Thank you for watching and listening to the No Spin News. We'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you for watching. To view full episodes of the No Spin News anytime, sign up to become a BillO'Reilly.com premium or concierge member today.